Well, let me know when you need to kick me out.
So thanks for starting taping, Karen. So I just wanted to start off today. If you looked at the agenda, it was a little jumbled. I didn't put it in any particular order. So I think probably Rich, we're going to start out with, after we do the minutes, we'll start out with Rich and have him go through the highlights, and he can probably hit more than one of these targets on his opening remarks. First off, I do want to say that I hope everybody, if you have family in Florida, that they're all safe and well taken care of. I also wanted to make a comment that our last couple of meetings, although I've been on the board for several years, this is very new for me. The last couple of meetings have been high intensity because we had some very important issues to discuss. I am looking forward to getting back to a little bit of normalcy, coming out of the last few years of the craziness when we didn't know what budget numbers were and we didn't have accurate numbers, and we would vote on things and they would change the next day, up to including the last two meetings that were mostly taken up with the campground issues. The campground, if any of you don't know, did pass. So that is, so we work with the will of the constituents and go forward with what we do with that. So that will be an integral part of financing, I believe, in questions, because that is a big project that I believe that we should be availed of information going forward on. So I thank everybody for getting through that with me. Thank you for coming to town meeting. I know it was hard that last Thursday where we threw things together, and the town meeting was, things just came up so quickly on us. So I want us to all take a deep breath and let's get back to some normalcy and some good work on behalf of the townspeople of Wellfleet. So with that said, I would like to dispose of the minutes first. So if anybody would like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Jeff Tash makes that motion. Second.
I'll second.
All right. I heard Stephen first, Mo. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous. Okay, that was easy. That was the easiest vote I've taken since I've been the chairperson. Okay, so I'd like to start out. Let's invite Rich up to talk about, I think, Rich, you can probably give us some town administrator updates and maybe move into whatever else you want to talk about that hits on the agenda or not. So I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. And I want to thank Karen for being on tonight and doing the recording and stuff. So I just want to keep you guys informed. You know, you've been through a lot of financial discussions in the past, and I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that. And I just want to keep you updated on where we are currently with our audits and stuff. So by the end of this week, it is our expectation that we're going to have fiscal years 20 through 22, all our financial statements submitted to the town auditors. We're in good communication, working with them. With any questions, we're able to give them a quick response. Whenever more detail, we're able to give them the more detail that they need. Communication's been very good. We are currently working with a new auditor within the firm, not the same auditor that we've been working with in the past. We're working with a woman named Renee Davis, who's just fantastic. It's been a pleasure to work with so far. So she's diving into the fiscal year 21 audit right now. Still kind of, reviewing the fiscal year 20, which was the problem year, but they have a good foundation of what the transactions had taken place, what the corrections look like. They still have some outstanding questions. And I think moving forward, they're just going to do the fiscal year 20, 21, 22 all at the same time, carry the numbers over. It seems like they're going to work with a fund. They're going to reconcile a fund. They're going to audit a fund, move it into the next year, carry it over, do that same fund in fiscal year 21, then move it over 22, and then finish out the fund and really go down the list of things. So I'm very hopeful that within the next month, we're going to have our audit through to fiscal year 22 is going to be complete. in communication with DOR. DOR has given us till October 28th to produce pretty much a financial audit for 21. That's their deadline before they're going to start considering withholding some state aid and things like that. And I think that they're really just trying to push us along, just saying, come on, wrap this up. And we are, and we're in a good position to really go through this seamlessly. So we're confident we're going to meet that 28th deadline of October. We'll be able to give them a Schedule A. They'll get everything they need. And then soon after, we'll have the free cash certified. So I'm expecting by the end of this calendar year, we're going to have our free cash certified, which will help us through the budget process, give us a little better expectation on what we want to do, and we can strategize what to do with any free cash that we have, replenish stabilization fund, talk about capital stabilization fund, look at the CIP, and just kind of really start discussing, where the town wants to be at the end of the fiscal year 23 going into fiscal year 24. So that's pretty much the overview of where the financial status is. With that said, the budgetary things for fiscal year 23. We've had a couple of items that are already running a little higher than what they were budgeted for. And I'm only making note of this because at some point I might be coming back to the finance committee to ask to transfer from your reserve fund to cover some of these additional costs. I don't want to do it too early because, we still have a remaining fiscal year, a considerable fiscal year to work with, and we could do budgetary transfers. But a couple of the keynotes that to discuss is, our insurance premium came in pretty high. That was about, $12,000 higher than what was budgeted for. Workman's comp came in a little high. I'm not sure where that is, but it was a little high. The consultancy for our financial team that's working on this is nearing full expenditure, and we still have some time left to go with them. I think we're going to throttle back quite a bit and really just work with Lisa at this point. But I'd also like to use Judy to help me go through this budget process a little bit, just because she was so instrumental working with Charlie last budget year. So we're going to keep an eye on that, but those are a couple of things that are just over budget that we know of. And I don't like operating in red in any given line item. I'd like to make transfers early, and historically in Provincetown, we always had the ability to do transfers immediately, the way that our budgets were structured. We could just do transfers and pretty much make those adjustments throughout the fiscal year. It seems the way that Wellfleet is structured, where the town meeting votes on individual budgets, you don't have that flexibility. And I'm going to work with Nick and see how can we handle that so it's a little easier throughout the year to make these little adjustments. So just want to put that on the radar. I think at some point in the future, I might come back to you guys and ask if we could use the reserve fund for that. But in the meantime, let's keep the reserve fund intact in case we actually have a true issue moving forward. With that, I can pause in case there's any questions out there.
Jeff, go ahead.
So, Rich, as the town went through this financial turmoil, I think I can share that for the financial committee, it was a real shit show. And one of the things that really changed with Charlie, and I think it's really important, is that we're seeing where the money is coming from, our revenue sources and where we stand, what money is segregated, in addition to all of the items that are on the budget, and being able to look at projections. So we started to do that towards the end of Charlie's reign, Prince Charlie, but something along those lines, so that we're getting on a more regular basis a complete picture of the town's financial situation. So,
and I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to retain Charlie to work through the first 5-year financial forecast. We're going to do a financial forecast, and we want to go through that exercise with Charlie to get his understanding of his thoughts and his assumptions moving forward, as well as input from us, Nick, as well as Cameron, your new financial team. One thing that I can say that I'm happy about is the fact that when you look through all that turmoil that you guys have been through, Wellfleet does not have a revenue problem. What Wellfleet had was a personnel problem. And it was the personnel problem that really made that financial mess. But the revenue is strong for Wellfleet, which is good. And that's something that we want to demonstrate when we go for our next bond rating, which was actually scheduled for today, but we're able to postpone it. But, to demonstrate that, hey, listen, through this financial period, everything was in place for us to get through that period. We had a stabilization fund that we used to stabilize our budget. That's what the intent of that for. And we have a plan to replenish it once it gets through. We, through that turmoil, we were able to identify financial flaws. Now, could we have identified it sooner? Sure. Could we, or should we have been able to identify the accounting problem sooner? Yeah, I think so. But in the end, it was identified. Help was immediately brought in. We basically worked through those accounting problems. We identified where the issues are, and we made the corrections. And now we're presenting what those corrections are to our audit team and eventually DOR. And at the outcome of that, we're going to replenish that stabilization fund. My discussions with DOR was, this is not as abnormal as you think. Out of the 351 communities that they have, it almost seems like a cyclical period where a town will go through this. And it might be triggered by personnel change. It might be triggered by something else, but it's not uncommon. It's just basically how you deal with it, how you address it, how you recover from it, and how you move forward. And so fortunately, we're three quarters of the way through. We just got to make sure that moving forward, we don't make the same mistake. And, and I think we have the team in place for that, which is good.
So, Jeff, just to that point, I did meet with, Nick, I almost called you Sean. I looked up and I saw the name. I did meet with Nick last week, and we went over some of the early renditions of the expense reports that he is producing. Again, he is still in the middle of making sure that the tail end of this gets completed so the audit can get forwarded. But we have had discussions, and I have expressed concern with Nick that what we have sorely been missing is the expense side, and it's really difficult to vote. It's okay to recommend budgets based on need and want, but it is going to be most important for us going forward to make sure that we have that revenue side. So I know these guys are aware of it. Also, thank you, Rich, because it is very refreshing to hear that we have shortfalls in the middle of the year, and prior to Henny Penny, the sky is falling. So that makes me feel like you have a good handle on already what's going on with the finances. So thanks for that. Anybody else want to speak? Oh, sorry, Fred, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think this may be an adjunct to what Jeff was saying in a sense. The word stabilization as applies to fund is a good word, because back in the day, and whenever that was, 4, 5, 6 years ago, there was this general sense year over year that things were sort of stable. And so the role of the FinCom, I was taken to task once for saying we were reactive, but that was in a way a good thing. It was that things were predictable. Every year, the department heads would come through, they'd present their capital and operating budgets, but there didn't seem to be big waves. And then, of course, we had the last 3 years with what I think we've mostly characterized as a transitional phase, kind of to the point you were making, which is this happens every once in a while. New accounting system, change in personnel, learning opportunities, and changes in the way the town spends. It's that last part that I think the Finance Committee is trying to get its head around. And part of it is understanding the revenues, to Jeff's point, and it's also understanding the impact of large future projects that are coming, but which haven't arrived yet, like Maurice's, which came on us in a hurry. But there, as we know, there are a lot of others, like the potential for a sewer and so on. Any visibility we can get or help to get in those areas will help to keep a stable view of what Wellfleet's going through over the next 3, 5, 7 years, because at least we'll be able to anticipate some of them and anticipate where the funding is going to come from, rather than, again, being reactive to it. And that's all I would say about that, is just anything you guys can do to help see ahead beyond the next budget cycle would be super helpful.
So to respond to that, if I could, Kathy,
Absolutely.
you know, one of the changes that had come out from a recent financial policy that was adopted by the select board was the town to work towards a 10-year capital program. And you know, the past week and a half, I've actually sent out the capital request form to our department heads to start putting together their capital program. And what you're going to see that's different is a 10-year forecast rather than a 5-year forecast. Typically, I'm not too much of a fan of this because so much changes sometimes in a relatively short time. But to speak to Fred's point, it's always nice to have an understanding of what those future projects are. What are those things that are out there that we may or may not know of? And they may sit in those out years in 8, 9, and 10. They might sit there for 10 years, who knows? But it's nice to have them out there, particularly like Fred said, you know, wastewater. We have a targeted watershed plan in with DEP. They're reviewing it. And should that get approved, you know, there's an implementation period of 20 years where they're going to want to see some things implemented. And by putting them into a 10-year forecast, not only can we understand what's coming, but also we can strategize on how we fund it. You know, so it's not on the backs of our taxpayers, but on, you know, through grant funds and leveraging grant funds on top of other grant funds to maximize our opportunity. So that's my only comment there.
I think thanks, Rich. I think that's really important. That's a really important point, that we start getting ahead of things, because really, since I've been on the board, we went from sleepy little town to Wellfleet that needs major investment in infrastructure and other things. And I think it's really important to make sure that we can do that. And actually, now that I was thinking of that, I was thinking of another report for Nick.
Kathy, if I could
Go ahead.
ask Rich. Okay.
Absolutely. Stephen.
I still would be interested in finding out from Charlie about, he's mentioned several times list of best practices to keep the town on track. One of them was like changing your auditors every 2 years. One thing he mentioned was, because in the past we have, and I'll be honest with you, we've been pretty conservative. Everyone's like, no, you don't want a 2.5 override. Well, Charlie pointed out that may be a small part of the reason why everything came to a head, in that we weren't really keeping up with inflation. So there were several different little best practices that he mentioned during this whole process. And I'd be interested to see if something in writing, actually, kind of like a roadmap of things to change. I think another one was making sure that each department, everybody within a department is cross-trained, so that when something happens, like what happened in the accounting department, you had an accountant who knew everything. And unfortunately, she was very nice, but she didn't really share it with other people. She left, and that was a void. Unfortunately, you know, same thing with the treasurer, who did a great job as well. But I remember one of the Powers and Sullivan's auditors, and this was when Harry Turkanian was a town administrator, they pointed out that you have to have a disaster recovery plan in place, not just a physical one. Also, each department should be everybody within a department should be cross-trained, so that if any one person is out or a key employee is out, the rest of the staff can take over, so that you don't run into these problems like we saw what happened back in 2019 or whatever. So if Charlie could please put together his list of best practices and share them with us, so that we could use them as part of our planning for the future as well.
So my comment to that would be, it's eerily strange how much you guys are in my head and my thinking on some of this stuff, because last week, might have been this week, I don't know, I can't keep track, but we did have a financial team meeting. So, I wanted to sit down with Charlie, Lisa, Mary, Judy, Nick, Cameron, and as well as our collector, Karen, to basically to hear from the financial team that has just gone through all the assessment of what was done, and basically just talk about what they uncovered, what they saw, whether they saw some pattern of mistakes. What were the critical areas? What were the critical junction where mistakes were made? And really just get an understanding from them of what those financial issues were. How can we identify them in the future? What are some of those best practices? And at the end of our hour and a half, 2 hour discussion, I had asked each of them to basically write a report on their findings and their best practice or suggestions for the town. So one that report is going to serve as just an education tool for us moving forward. It's something that we can reflect back on what those errors look for, what those errors looked like, how to identify them, where to look. What was the mindset of the staff at that time that led them down the road to make these errors over and over again, things like that. So that's one thing that they're going to be working on, and part of their closeout is just basically a final document that we could just say, this is what happened, this is the results, and these are the suggestions moving forward. So in terms of cross-training, I believe in that a lot. Your staff here in Wellfleet is really understaffed. I mean, we talked about Wellfleet not really growing with the time, and they haven't. So a lot of the staff already have 5 titles already, 3 to 5 titles. But I still think it's important to have that cross training, because of what you said is someone gets hurt, they're out 2 weeks or 4 weeks, that the town hall doesn't come to a halt. It has to keep going. It has to be able to function. And in the public works end, my background, we had the same thing. We can't have one person that knows how to modify the message board on the street. We need to have multiple people that know how to do it. We don't need to have one person that knows how to do a real estate transfer on water. Multiple people for when people are out sick. So that's one of my strategies, just moving forward. Again, still trying to identify how that's going to look like, how we can work. Still trying to understand our staffing's capacity, what their strong points are, what the weak points are, and try to make those adjustments moving forward. So I do recognize that as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Also, I would mention that we can do transfers at any time, right? We don't have to wait till.
Yeah, we can do transfers anytime, but we have to do the finance committee has to approve the transfers. I think that's what they were talking about. So like if something happened on Tuesday,
Oh, okay.
we weren't meeting for another month, Stephen, that they would have to
I
wait
see
a
what you're
month.
saying, yeah.
So
You mean like a slush fund just in case?
don't say that. Don't
To
say
take
slush
money from, yeah.
Just one more last comment. One last thing, just sort of for myself, as a member of this committee, I was really frustrated, if not embarrassed, that we didn't detect that there was problems earlier. And that's our role, is to try to be a watchdog, to provide advice. So that's the only thing I'm coming at is, we really, we were on a stabilization type of an approach, but I think it's really important to try to do a better job, not to, just overall sharing with us the kind of the finances as they're going and progress during the year. Because this last time, it was really hard.
Could I comment on that? he's right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think
Susan.
the simple question would have been back in 2019 is if the finance committee had asked, had cash been certified? That might have uncovered. I think in the past that was done. It's not a formal thing, but maybe once we get through all this and cash has been certified, we know what date we need to have it certified by, and then the finance committee can formally ask the town, manager or the board,
agenda for
has
every
cash
year?
been certified?
The annual
You
agenda.
know, again, fiscal year 20, you had an audit, you had free cash certified in 20. It didn't paint the picture that it was. I mean, I think fundamentally that there were just, departments that worked in silos that didn't communicate with each other, reconciling of financials weren't occurring. And, so there's a breakdown on many levels on why that happened. So I don't think it's as apparent of, free cash being certified. You had the audit and stuff like that. So I think it's that internal stuff that can go on for so long before certain things are identified. And so we're going to be taking that report from the financial team and hopefully start building some SOPs, standard operating procedures on cash transfers, reconciling the books every month, treasurer, accountant, things like that Nick can speak better to, but that's the idea is really to set those really fundamental financial things that municipalities should be doing that weren't done. And then one thing we're also looking into, which we'll hopefully get off the ground pretty soon, is just starting weekly financial team meetings, which will include accountant, treasurer, the collector, the assessors, myself, and just basically, what are we working on? What are we coming up? Tax rate setting, things like that. Just have those discussions. What information are you going to be needing? What are you looking for us? When are the bills going out? Just having that communication so we don't go into our silos and just work in front of a computer that's so easy to do, because we're always just trying to get information processed, to do our job, but we always forget to step back and actually see how we're doing with other people as well, other team members.
Thanks, Rich. Fred has his hand up. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, I just want to say briefly, in defense of the finance committee in that period of time, is that we did meet with Gene Ferrari in the winter of
Yes.
2019. He told us he was in deep shit trying to get the Vadar system converted, but then COVID hit and our TA walked out the door by June-ish. And the third quarter of the year was getting a new TA. There was a lot of stuff going on in 2020 that made it easy to miss details like that. I would like to say on behalf of this finance committee, I think we've made up a lot of ground since then in terms of being more diligent, more aware, and more involved.
Well, I think the town overall is in a much better place. I mean, this is behind us. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to the town financially. And I think we've all learned a lot. And moving forward, I don't think it's ever going to happen again. And also you have different personalities who were, the TA, unfortunately, didn't have the diplomacy to convince some people to work with him. I was not a big supporter of him, but he painted himself into a corner. We don't have that going on. So I think overall the town is better off.
So I think just to summarize this one, because I don't, it is past us, so I don't want to, I'm going to summarize a couple of things and maybe we can move on and ask a couple of questions about Maurice's. Just to summarize that, we did what we did. We learned a lot. A lot of people learned a lot. I agree with the personnel issue after meeting with Mo and Jeff and meeting twice a month with Charlie. There was systemic issues that needed to be solved. It wasn't just processing and process and procedure. I feel much better with the team that's in place now. And I think that we know the questions that we have to ask going forward. to make sure that we have some transparency, and we're getting the answers, that we need, and not just, oh, sorry, I can't get those to reconcile, and then having them walk out of the room. So, more to come on this. You know, this is the kind of the first address after the storm. The first address from Rich. We're going to be hearing much more from Rich and Nick, with new reports being generated, with new transparencies, with new procedures, to satisfy, hopefully to satisfy all of you that we're going forward in the right direction. And if anybody else has a question or comment on that, if not, I'd like, Rich, if you could give us a little, Maurice's moving forward. Where are we at past? What do we do? What do you need from us? What do we have to do with that? And then we'll go into, I know I'm taking these out of order, but I figured kind of logically, then we could kind of go into the budget scheduling with the liaison reports and our FinCom scheduling, after that. So. if you could-
Well, I certainly appreciate that. It was a late night on the select board last night, so I appreciate you guys putting me up front on the agenda. Maurice's, so we're going to buy a campground. We're moving in that direction. Originally, our thought was to do a $6.5 million bond, go for a rating, an S&P rating, go out for bond, go out for sale. There were some questions on whether this purchase would be tax exempt or not tax exempt. And we basically were able to identify this would be a tax exempt borrowing, which is good, gets us a better rate. At the end of the day, you know, we had some concerns with the fact that we had to go through S&P for a bond rating. And we were working with Power Consultants to see if we could get an unaudited balance sheet for 21, a Schedule A for 21, to be able to demonstrate to S&P that, you know, like I said earlier, we don't have a revenue problem. We had a personnel issues. We're working through it, and try to just demonstrate, you know, you're in good hands here. You know, we're not a town that can't handle this debt. Then the discussion, we kind of were just talking about it more and more and saying, hey, listen, you know, we still have $2.2 million that we have for a fire suppression system at the school. That project's not going to be able to get off the ground until the summer, or until next summer. And so we had talked about going for basically a 1-year ban on that borrowing, on the $6.5 million, the purchase. And so then it becomes an S&P rating review on a note rather than a bond. We were scheduled to have a meeting with S&P today, and at the end of the day, they wanted, if they're going to go out and do a new rating, they were going to need a completed Schedule A of fiscal year 21, which we don't have. You know, we're not going to get that until the end of the audit. So talking with the financial advisors, apparently there's a way that you can actually go and basically sell the bond or the band without a new rating. They basically said we just work off of the rating in fiscal year 20, which is a AAA rating. We can still do that, and it's not a problem. I wish they told me that from the beginning, after going through the whole gauntlet of how we're going to deal with S&P, all our meetings on how we're going to talk with them. So at the end of the day, that's where the strategy was and still is basically a 1-year ban, wrap up, you know, some of our other big projects, all into one in October of 2023. Monday night.
How much is that ban going to be?
We don't know yet.
You don't know.
We don't know yet. Monday night.
Do you know the rate by any chance? I'm sorry.
We don't, because we haven't
Okay.
gone out to sale. We're going to go in the next couple of weeks, find out what it is. The estimate is I think on the bond was 3.75% for for a non-taxed borrowing as compared to 4.5% for if it was a tax borrowing. And again, this is outside of my comfort zone, so I'm really trying to abbreviate best I can and give you
No,
where we
that sounds
stand.
good.
Exactly, just trying to be transparent on where the discussions are. On Tuesday night, there'll be discussions, regarding the purchase and sale with Maurice's and whether, timeline, and kind of discuss the timeline of the closing that may impact when we actually are going to close on the property or not, might adjust. So we're going to wait to see what happens on Tuesday night, see if there's some adjustment. If things change and we're not going to close on the 31st, it's some other date, we'll reevaluate to say, okay, maybe at that future date or this other date, we might be able to have our financials squared away. We'll reevaluate whether we're going to bond, or those are two options. But I think for the most part, through our financial advisors, there's some thought and projection that waiting a year might be helpful. That there's some discussion in the industry that they may see in the second or third quarter of fiscal year or calendar year 23, maybe a drop in interest rates. When we were having these discussions, I think that the Feds had raised the interest rates, so they were even higher. So I think the thought was to just basically do a short-term ban and then bond next year. And that was their advice from them. So that's pretty much where we stand.
So, Rich, I have a quick question on that. Are we concerned at all if we're using the past bond rating, the AAA past bond rating? Are we concerned at all that the recent fiscal issues are going to affect that bond rating, which would in turn affect the rate? Is there a concern with the timing issue? And if that's over your comfort level, then I will track that question.
I've asked that question, and the financial advisor doesn't think so. I think we can demonstrate that it's not. I've asked it in many different ways. I've asked about the stabilization fund, of not having that fund there, and they don't feel that that's a negative. That fund is there for a purpose. We used it for the purpose, and we have a plan to replenish it. And so it shouldn't look negatively on that. I think they're looking for our revenues. When I talked to Powers and Sullivan, separate from our financial advisors, they said, your unaudited balance sheets, that they're really strong. They look good. So I think in the eyes of if we were to go for a full bond rating, would still come out okay.
Thanks. Anybody have any questions on that? Wow, that's awesome. You guys are awesome. We're going to whip through the rest of this. Thank you. Thanks for the update on that, Rich. Liaison. So liaison assignments and expectations. I think I want to jump to Rich sent out, which Karen sent out everybody, and the things that we need Rich for so we can get him a good night's sleep. The budget scheduling, as always, every year I sent that out with an attachment. I think we have the budget scheduling down. Fred did want to talk briefly about the liaison assignments and the expectations of the liaison assignments. So I think I want to take the budget scheduling and the liaison assignments and toss those to Fred. Rich, in the past, just as a preface, in the past, what we have done is each one of our finance committee members has had a department that they are a liaison with. And where you're new and you're working through policies and procedures and processes, this isn't really a process for us that we were kind of starting it, and it wasn't really firmed up, but it worked really well for us. In the past, the finance committee and the select board met in the distant past, met one night and tried to get every department and have their budgets explained and moved on. And from the finance committee, we had a little bit more detailed questions than the select board had. So what we did is we began breaking up the department heads and inviting them with their budgets once the TA and select board had finalized the budgets. And our purpose in that was to understand the budget so we could advise to town meeting. So in the past, what we had done is we have assigned liaisons to department heads, and those liaisons would meet when it was convenient, either with the department head, outside of anybody else, and bring that report back to a finance committee meeting. So we would schedule, like police and fire would be one. Generally, those department heads would come to the meeting in case we had any budget questions. We would do recreation, beach, so we would group them together and go through probably 4 or 5 meetings. The school would definitely be one. And we'd go through several series of meetings in January, February, and March to prepare for town meetings, so we knew that we understood the individual budgets. I think it became cumbersome for the department heads, but it was very worth it for us to understand what their budgets were. So that was our process, and I think we'd like to go through it, but Fred wanted to spearhead that on behalf of the finance committee. He actually brought it in place a few years ago. So that's kind of the overview of where we are and what Fred is going to discuss at this moment. So take it away, Fred. Unmute yourself first. Fred, unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Kathy. The document I sent out today is just a slight amendment over the one we produced last year, with the primary difference being that now that there is a 10-year capital plan required, it does change a little bit what the dialogue would be between the liaisons and the departments, in that, as you remember, in years past, we've kind of gotten spotty, I think that's a fair word, spotty results in terms of what individual departments may have submitted as 5-year plans. Police department, you'd see the cruisers reliably every year, bing, 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 and then whatever other capital plans there were. Some other departments might have year 1 and nothing else after that. And the open question last year was, if we're going to send liaisons to talk to these departments, encourage them to fill in those other years, make a best guess. I mean, I remember one in particular, the question was, do you really have no capital plans at all for the next 5 years except for next year? And they said, yeah. Well, it's just not possible. It was a big department. Now with 10 years, I think to the point Rich was making before, in a way it is backing into the strategic goals of the town, at least from a capital perspective. It doesn't touch on the operating issues necessarily. And a lot of large capital projects have operational components, new staff, different roles, changes in skill sets, whatever it's going to be. And that, under the best, in my mind anyway, under the best case, would be under the umbrella of a comprehensive plan or a strategic plan for the town, where everything would kind of make sense in context. But this is not, this is a way to do it. And when the liaisons go to talk to their departments, I think in a way you've got the short-term and the longer-term narrative, and it'll take a little more ferreting on the part of the liaison to kind of encourage the department heads to think out of the box. And I talked to Rich about it last week in terms of expectations. I also spoke to Ryan briefly, Ryan Curley. And I don't want to misquote you, Rich, but I think the way I understood it was, make your best guess. If you think you've got a large capital project out there 6, 7, 8 years out, do the best you can to guesstimate scope, size, timing, of course, and put down numbers that right now are not going to be accurate, at least not 100% accurate. And look at the Wellfleet Elementary School, went from $1 million to $2 million in 1 year. The Maurice's Campground septic would be maybe 5 or 6 million if you did it today. Who knows what it'll be in 3 years. So you can't necessarily say you're going to get locked into those numbers, but you can at least make a sort of scope-wide guesstimate of what you think magnitude-wise it's going to look like. And that, I think, hopefully will provide Rich with, and the rest of the administration, with some sort of insight into what's coming. And it'll force, if that's the right word, the department heads to think ahead, which has been a finance committee goal now for at least 4 or 5 years, I think, to just ask especially the departments that have large potential outlays or major renovations to do, to articulate those goals and say, yep, I'm going to be talking to a department tomorrow that that expects to have a major revision to one of their buildings in, pick a number, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. It's going to have to be planned for. It'll have to be scoped. There'll have to be a feasibility study probably ahead of the actual work. That can be put down on paper, even if it's not 100% correct today. So that's all I wanted to say about the document. Read it. I don't think there's rocket science involved in there. These are conversations for the most part. Getting the most specifics you can on the upcoming 3 or 4 years is a positive. You want clarity about what's coming up more or less immediately, on the theory that the departments have thought about it, that they've actually maybe started to spec out what it's going to cost to do something. And then you take, a grain of salt with anything out past, pick the number, 3, 4, 5 years. But something has to be there if they anticipate it. Blank pages will be a problem, I think, for everybody in the long run, but mostly for Rich, who has to run this thing at the end of the day. Does that seem fair, Rich?
Yeah, no, that seems fair, and in your assumption is correct in terms of the long-term planning. I think, the message is, do your best you can. I mean, no one has a crystal ball, but you should be thinking about where you want your department, where you want things to go. Some departments will have a better opportunity to really forecast that 10-year CIP. Example, the fire department, they have a little more of a routine schedule of replacing fire hoses or replacing engines and trucks, like, stuff like that. But that is the message for some of those other departments, whether it be shellfish, library, community service. If there's something that should be on the radar that's on 10 years, be more concerned about putting it on there and doing your best estimate for what that cost would look like. And then we can refine it over the years. This is the first rollout of the 10 years. So the goal is to get them to think long-term, is to get them to start steering the department where they want to be, start elevating the department, in terms of what their tasks are. So I agree with everything you said, Fred.
Okay, thank you.
So I think the long-term planning part of this is good, because we have been trying to take that on, and now with the select board and Rich on board with it, I think it has some teeth, and it should be a thoughtful exercise for the department heads. I want to just kind of finish up with Rich and Nick, if anybody has any more questions or anything else before I go, because I want to let them off, but I want you guys to hang on for a little bit, but I'm not done yet, Fred, hang on. I'm just saying, I want you guys to hang on, because I want to just confirm liaison, who's liaison. We've lost Linda, so we need to maybe reconfirm or reassign liaisons. So I wanted to do that. We'll get some of it done here today. We might have to move it off to next meeting. Fred, Fred spoke. Does anybody have any questions for Fred? Stephen, I can't see your hand, so.
Nope. I don't
Okay,
have a question
good.
for Fred.
Okay, so.
I'll keep shellfish and the harbor master.
Okay, hang on, because I gotta write this all down. I'm not ready to write yet. Anything else for Rich? Or actually, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Nick's new reports, but I'm not gonna talk directly to him or at him. So I think we should let these guys go, because they had a late night last night. Fred, before you go, Fred's got his hand up.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the genesis of this was. The charter, as I recall, and I just looked up the latest version I have, which I think was from about 2017 or 18, says that the capital improvement plan is supposed to be submitted to the Finance Committee on October 1st. As of last year, it showed up as October 21st. I don't know who made that change. I don't think that's correct unless I don't have a current version of the charter. But it does say clearly October 1st in the charter. So I just wanted to make that point. If October 21st is what has to work, then, it is what it is. But
If it's in the charter, you're supposed to go with that.
Right.
Otherwise, they
the
got to do a
charter-
charter change, but let's just let them off the hook this year.
Well, yeah.
I was gonna,
I was gonna say, the last 2 years,
I
we did
mean-
not get it on October 1st.
No,
for
I
a
don't think
variety
we
of
got it.
reasons.
We
No,
got
I
it,
know, right?
minutes
We
after
haven't
town
for a
meeting.
while.
we had it 10 minutes after town meeting last year, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
but every year I've gone to the town administrator and said, I'd like, well, 2 years ago, it was with, no, I just blocked on her name. After
Maria.
Danforth. Yeah, Maria, she didn't even know that, she didn't know. So mid-October, I said, capital improvement plan. Last year, it was Charlie Sumner and he was under all kinds of duress. So it's not like we haven't managed to get the capital improvement plan done. I just wanted to note that the charter says October 1st.
So
I
can-
move that we give them a get out of jail for free card.
I can assure you that this was sent to me by Rich Waldo, so he is aware of the schedule because I got the email from him.
yeah, I was gonna say, I appreciate you identifying that. I mean, I guess I hung too much emphasis or too much weight on the fact that this has been well vetted, this schedule in the past, and it's really just, adding the current year and just adjusting the date small. But I will tell you, I will not meet an October 1st deadline, for the capital improvement plan, but subsequent years, next year, we'll make note of that. Maybe we'll make the adjustment or make a note in the schedule, just so next year when we look at it, we'll know to maybe move it back to October 1st if that's where it needs to be, or we change the charter. But I did want to say though that, the October 14th, the first deadline, which is really the first deadline for the select board, is actually the 18th. So that date's off there. And I addressed that last night with the select board. But the 5-year financial forecast won't be ready then. I told them we'll shoot for November 1st. And the reason behind that is, like I said earlier, that I want to rope Charlie in with this. I want to make sure that we get a good understanding and we transition right and our thoughts are right and they all align. And he's just not available in that middle of October to really be able to meet. He's already working on it, but he's just not going to be able to meet with us, go over certain things and strategize. So the 18th for that 5-year financial forecast is going to be November 1st timeframe.
And I think that's fine, considering that I like Stephen's get out of jail free card because, you have everything else that's going on and this is your first go around. What I'd like to ask you, Rich, is what we laid out for our process in this. Do you have any preferences, processes, anything you'd like to change? Because we're open to, we're all going to have to get along here and work towards the ultimate goal. So if you have any best practices, or if you're thinking that doesn't work, or, we would be open to suggestions to, whatever, if you have a best practice on that.
Yeah, nope. I think the only thing that I had a question on was it sounded like you were saying that it's that the TA budget goes to the select board who votes on a budget that goes to the finance committee, which is a little opposite of what I'm used to. Usually it's TA, finance committee, and then the select board as the final that goes to the warrant. So
Yeah. So that might just be me, because whatever your process is, the select board, the TA develops up a budget. The way we get it presented is the TA presents a budget, the select board presents a budget. I don't know how you talk about them if you go into separate rooms and come out and, play Rock'em Sock'em Robots. But eventually it comes to us. My point with that is that the finance committee does not develop the budget. We only advise to town meeting. So our interest is after that budget is given to, after the budgets are given to us, for us to understand them, which requires a little bit more in-depth conversation with department heads, other than, trying to get 8 department heads in 2 hours with the full select board meeting.
Okay.
Fred's got his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted
Were you going to comment on that, or? Okay,
Yes,
go ahead.
on that specific point, we have a charter responsibility as a finance committee to give you guidance or direction on the formatting of the report. Last year, we presented something to Charlie to essentially create a executive summary of each department at the front end. That didn't quite happen because there was the stress of getting it done. It's pretty simple stuff, but it mostly was oriented to a brief description of what was changing in the budget, kind of what was the narrative for that department. And if there were extraordinary new items or any significant changes, to identify those at the front, because historically they get buried in the back in the detail lines and are easy to miss, and year over year, the operating budgets don't change radically except when they do, but most of the time it's a new position or it's a new, usually it's new personnel. And to identify that up front so that anybody who was casually reading the budget would recognize it right away was the basic change we asked for last year.
So let me comment on that. What's in the charter is the finance committee can ask for budget format. Doesn't say anything about narratives. It's the way the numbers are presented to the finance committee. So like, for instance, I've asked always that we could have a 2-year historical or a 3-year historical when they're presented to us. The charter doesn't say anything about, it's nice to have a narrative, but it's not really required. The reference in the charter is to the physical format of the numbers being presented to the finance committee.
Yeah, I will say though.
I'm gonna leave that to the professionals to duke that out.
Yeah, I disagree, frankly.
Go ahead, Rich.
I was just going to comment, one thing that had struck me when I was looking at the budget from the previous year was that at least I didn't see the historical actual expenses for some of those things. And Nick and I, as well as Judy, are already working on something, one to help the department head so they can see historically what their 21 actuals were, what their 22 actuals were, what their fiscal year 23 budgets are, and just so that they can see whether they're budgeting high, budgeting low, whether they're seeing a trend increase. And I didn't see that in last year's budget. So we are adding that, whether it gets wrapped into the budget presentation or the budget, report that's submitted at the end. I'm not sure yet, but the expectation is, yeah, it will be there.
And if you go back 3 or 4 years.
Oh, I'm sorry, Fred. The reason we didn't have that is because we didn't know what they were.
Yeah, nobody did.
They weren't able to untangle that with any kind of confidence to put that in a document to do that. So that was kind of a, let's just get through it and put our heads down and move on.
If you look at budgets from like 2017, 18, you'd see 2 or 3 years of actuals, plus to Kathy's point, the TA budget, the select board budget, and all of that would be on, to Stephen's point, all of that would be on one page. So you could easily see jumps year over year by line item.
Yeah. Okay.
The way it was.
Much easier.
Yeah, a lot easier. And yeah. So if anybody, if you guys are, if we're done with Rich and Nick, if anybody has any more questions for him, I think I'll give them a break tonight.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. You're welcome to stay on if you want, but yeah, this part's the boring part.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Appreciate the offer. Thank you, guys.
Hi to Nick,
Thank
Sean.
you.
I know, Sean.
Bye, thanks.
So just quick stuff for us. So cool stuff happening. Like I said, I met with Nick. So let's see, FinCom scheduling, we'll go through that. Anticipated new reports and timing. I did meet with Nick. I've hashed out a couple of reports that I'd like to, that we are going to see once he learns his new system. He had a different system. He did not use Vadar. He used a different system. So he, again, trying to get the numbers crunched for the auditor, getting the tail end of that and learning that new operating system. He is developing new income stream reports, and I've looked at a couple of them. So he will not be here next month, but what's October? He will be at our November. So I'm hoping that he will be able to start to present and explain some of the new revenue reports. So that is coming. I think it's great to have, we will have either Rich or Nick or Cameron here at each one of our meetings, depending on what the topics are. So I think it's great that we're going to be able to see just more than the town administrator. We'll have everybody involved to be able to ask questions to going forward. With that said, I'm going to jump into assigning liaison assignments. Does anybody want to do anything else before we do that? No? Okay. Fred, do you remember who your liaisons were? And or do you guys remember who you were a liaison to? And do you want to keep that assignment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, I'm fine with mine.
Okay, Stephen, who are you?
Actually Shellfish and the Marina. And Nancy approached me about the CIP budget, which I thought was pretty impressive. So I'm speaking to her on Friday.
I love that. Fred, who did you have?
The schools and the library.
Oh, God bless you. I remember that now. Mo, who do you have?
I've never gotten an assignment.
Okay, we'll hold that thought. Ira, who did you have?
Fire department.
Okay. Jeff Tash.
I have police and also energy/climate action.
Okay. Okay, and is that Bob on the phone?
It is. I tried to Zoom on the computer and nothing's happening. So here I am on the phone.
Thank you.
I have
we missed
water.
you.
You look marvelous.
You have
Nice
water?
color green.
Yeah, I have water and sewer, not the sewer, the
Wastewater.
wastewater. Thank you.
Wastewater. Okay. So, Linda, what did Linda have? I think she had
DPW.
DPW. Mo, do you want DPW?
Sure.
Okay. Who else is left?
I had health and conservation, I guess, and recreation and aging.
Okay, and oh God, that's right. Is that all of them?
Well, I
I
should
think-
also note that Mo had affordable housing, which is a bigger deal now than it might have been a year ago.
Yeah, that was barely anyhow, not worth explaining. But Fred, you've been so involved in that. I don't mind jumping in there.
Mo had affordable housing?
Okay, so affordable housing doesn't have a budget. I thought the liaisons were directly to department
Yeah.
heads that actually had budget.
Yeah, so you know what we'll leave affordable housing up to? We'll leave that up to, for Rich and Nick to make sure that we're updated on anything financial that's coming out regarding the campground.
That's fair.
Is that, if I'm missing any department, or if anybody doesn't, who's not here?
Jen.
Jen's not here.
Jen had, hold on, I'm looking at my list here. She had recreation and beach.
Okay, recreation and beach. Okay. So how did, you had council, Jeff had council on aging. Did Jeff Barron's had council on aging? How did we split those departments? Do we have?
So
that-
they're all under human services. So you
Yeah.
could treat it as human services and just have one liaison, or you can break it out, whichever.
Health and conservation. Okay, we'll talk about that, when Jen's here. I'll see what she wants to do, because Jeff, who did you meet with last year? Do you remember? Jeff Barron's?
Jeff Barron, I met with, let me just look at my notes, one sec.
Is it-
I met with Suzanne for sure, and Becky, I guess.
Terry
Oh,
Fraser,
okay.
maybe?
No, not Terry. Hold on.
Hillary?
Yeah,
Hillary.
Hillary.
Hillary. Yeah,
Yeah.
Hillary is health and conservation.
Suzanne
then
and Hillary.
rec
Yeah.
Yeah, so rec and aging, maybe Jen has rec and aging. Did you meet with Suzanne?
I
think
did.
so.
I talked to her. Yeah, but I forget. I knew that she was doing several things, and I can't remember where the line was drawn.
Okay, well, we'll leave that, we'll.
Whatever. I'm flexible, so whatever. Obviously, you come up with, it's great.
Okay, I'll firm up that with Jen. I'll firm that up with Jen when she's here next time, or shoot her an email. So I guess that's the, the liaison assignments and expectations, which can be refined as we go along. FinCom scheduling, we voted for every Friday, every fourth Wednesday, every fourth Wednesday. Is that still work for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna send out a longer, I'm gonna look at the calendar and anything that conflicts, like the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, which we did last year, which was ridiculous. We will move around and look for an alternate time on that. So I'll work with Karen on that. Hi, Karen. I'll work with Karen on that to make sure we're not conflicting with any other boards or anything. Anybody want to talk about anything else? Did I miss anything? Pressing issues, points, comments, considerations.
No,
Happy to be done at 8:05.
Yay.
Wow, it was pretty grueling. So again, I appreciate everybody sticking with this committee through that, those tenuous couple of meetings. And I feel like I've been baptized by fire, but hopefully I'll get better at this job under Fred's tutelage.
Well, what's her name in Game of Thrones got baptized by fire too?
Yeah, Dracarys.
Khaleesi with the dragons on her shoulders. She came
Yeah.
out stronger.
Death by dragon.
Oh, no, I don't watch that.
Oh,
so
no, you're
are we
missing.
finished?
As a chair, you better watch it.
Anybody ready? Oh, no, is it gonna be on the next agenda? If
Motion to
you're ready-
adjourn.
if you're ready to adjourn, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Jeff Behrens moved it. Fred second, Stephen moved it. Everybody moved it. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.